but I will continue on with the agenda if you want to put it up. All right. So we're starting, we're called to order, acceptance of minutes from April 24th. Any, yes, Jess?
I just want to offer two minor changes to the April 25th meeting in section 5. When Josh talks about it being a good idea to deliver both a written report and there just needs to be a dash. It says 510-minute presentation instead of 5 to 10-minute presentation.
Glad you caught that.
And then in section 7 about updates in the first the very last thing it says is reviewed by legal and health. And I think that's just supposed to be health department. But unless anybody else has any changes, I will make a motion to accept the minutes from our April and May meeting
As corrected.
as corrected.
Is there a second?
Second.
So Bill Lyons has that we now have motion and a second, and the minutes have been accepted. Took us 20 minutes to get to that point last week, so I'm glad we got there. All right. With any questions and criteria, continue. All right. Is that you, Bill?
Yeah. Okay, we're now on our third and maybe last draft of this. You'll recall in March when we had the brainstorming visioning session for the new standing committee at the library. We decided to put together something in writing that would really lay out our sense of purpose and where we as a committee thought that we could have some impact and value added. I always like Bert's phraseology, where we as a committee could get leverage and accelerate, or scale and accelerate. I think that was really the thrust of that. So I put together a draft that we reviewed in April, got comments on it, not really any significant comments. People generally seem to like the draft, and got more comments in May. Effie offered to work with me on revising it, which we did, and I think it's a stronger document. First, how many of you have had a chance to review it before the meeting? And if not, no problem. I'll just take a little while to go through the main points. How many of you have had a chance? And no, okay. So
It's good to go through it.
I'll just hit the key points, and particularly the things that have changed in this. It's now renamed, instead of questions and criteria, it's guidelines for developing strategies to advance sustainability. And Effie, I think was thinking that this might be something useful for us as a committee to share with other communities outside the area. So I think we made it a little bit less Portsmouth specific, or maybe so it would travel a bit. That was some of the thinking there. Bert.
I have an idea, Bill.
Yeah.
If you're open to it, could we just go around, everybody read a section and just get it all through, and people make notes as people reading, and that would be saved. Get everybody on.
Sure. I wasn't thinking of reading through the whole thing, but it's only a page and a half, but yeah, sure. Maybe just before we do that, it's now in 2 pieces. So when we review it, think of it as page 1 is internal, a think piece for this committee. So really us helping ourselves as a committee get a sense of purpose and focus. And then the second is really a standalone attachment that could become an external piece that could be shared outside the committee. It could be shared with other committees. It could be shared with the city council. Could be shared with other city staff members who probably would want to get input on it as well. But it's I think really intended to be a tool So when we talk about what this committee does and what we mean by sustainability principles and sustainability practices, it's an attempt really to lay that out so those could become part of a discussion. And you'll see at the bottom a list of some possible places where these guidelines could be applied. But why don't we just start at the
But I
the
can
top.
start,
yeah,
having written the ordinance.
Yes.
I could just read that top section.
okay.
The City of Portsmouth, New Hampshire Sustainability Committee developed this document to help define its role as a new standing committee and to identify strategies to meet its responsibilities as defined by the ordinance. The Sustainability Committee shall provide advice and guidance to the City Council, the City Manager, and City Boards with respect to 1, implementation of the Climate Action Plan, achieving Portsmouth's renewable energy policy, and additional recommendations on increasing energy efficiency, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and taking measures to build resiliency against climate change. Increasing awareness of sustainable practices among residents, businesses, visitors, municipal staff, and other stakeholders to ensure that Portsmouth remains a leader as an eco-municipality. 3, standing for environmental justice while protecting our ecosystems. This document includes guidelines that the committee provides as a tool for the city council, staff, other committees, and the public to encourage adoption of sustainable principles and practices and strategies to modify or design policies, programs, or decisions. The committee will invite input from stakeholders to adapt the guidelines as the city's needs and priorities change. As the committee articulates its role and value added, it is helpful to begin with the definition of sustainability. In 1987, the United Nations Brundtland
Yep.
Commission defined sustainability as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Sustainability is advanced through scalable and continuous efforts to improve the balance among the 3 pillars of sustainability: economy, environment, and social equity throughout all activities.
So that's trying to lay out some common ground, so everyone's on the same page. Any comments or thoughts on how that holds up? Because this is the first page, and then the only other thing on the internal part of this is the examples.
I just want to
Yeah.
applaud you for adding the actual ordinance in, because the first draft didn't have it, and I
No,
think it's
that's
much
right.
stronger
Yeah.
with it in it.
I think the first draft referenced the website, and I think that having it more formally tied to the new ordinance, I think really works well.
Because I kind of like it and I've been massaged with all this. New person hearing, to me, this is big, it's abstract, difficult to get actions out of, but lays the framework. I'd like, just, if you wanted to, was there anything that struck you about this as somebody seeing it kind of for the first time?
Probably just that I would need to read it once or twice more to really absorb the information.
And that's what I'm feeling. Even that's why I wanted you to read it. I'm a slow reader. I don't take things in quickly. However, I think it's an in-depth look at what we want to do. To me, as I read through it, if we could do what was in here, we would be accelerating and scaling the movement towards a climate-safe planet. Having said that, we really need to drill down.
Mhm.
And that's where I think the next part comes in.
Yep.
Because this is kind of like up here, these are the values upon which I live my life: truth, transparency. All those are big words. They're hard to bring out when you get down to individual settings. So I think that's the way I'm seeing that. The second part now is they're not specific actions, but places where we might apply some kind of a matrix to all of these areas to keep them moving forward. Is that frame it the way you were thinking, Bill?
Yeah, and again, this, I think, we tried to get this to a single page, and it's an internal document, so it wouldn't go out more broadly. Probably, let's say, when we get to the second part, that's more external public facing. And with that could come a very audience-friendly explanation of what this committee is and what the committee does. Slides, let's say if you were meeting with another city committee or a citizens group and you were representing the sustainability committee, you'd have a friendly version of this, but this is just a attempt to get down in writing a kind of a common understanding. And I know that we're also going to work on updating the website, so that would be a chance to expand on this or use this or drill down, whatever's useful.
Or did you want to say something?
Yeah, website context is helpful. Thank you. That was kind of where I was going to go with this. So I really like the potential areas, right? I think that makes it actionable in the sense of where that change is being initiated. I wonder if it would be helpful to do potential and past. So, because we have some policies that this committee has supported and helped push through in the past that apply to some of these. And so, what if under those, we say, for example, X policy, passed on this date that we continuously support to show kind of we're looking forward, but this is not new work, right? And then on the website, and I think Peter and I had talked about this when we were talking about the municipal and policy that we passed on, like, where does that live on the website? And can we have a list of those policies that we've worked on and gotten through on the website as well, to really bring home on what that action is really what we're trying to drive and the types of things that we're trying to move forward with.
I think that's a great commentary. So I would say it could be past, present, and future. And by documenting things the committee has done in the past, I think is useful, particularly when we have new members that we didn't begin on January 1st, that it has a long history, and maybe just listing some of the things like just last year, the substantial input to the cap, but then the cap is still a work in progress and will need to be implemented. So that's work for the future. Yeah, great. It's a great comment. Any other comments so far? And would somebody like to read the examples? Because these examples are intended to be representative and not all inclusive, but really touching on all the different sectors we have been or hopefully will be involved in. Anyone else want to read it?
Sure, I'll read the next. Examples of potential applications of guidelines. The following are examples of current and future priority activities in Portsmouth where the committee could collaborate with stakeholders to advance sustainability principles and practices. The Capital Improvement Plan, development and evaluation of proposed projects, adoption of greenhouse gas reduction and other sustainability criteria. The Master Plan Update, development of goals, policies, and community vision. Redesign of Market Square, vision and trade-offs among competing values. Housing affordability and choices, policies, projects, and partnerships. Reduction of waste, policies, ordinances, and industry partnerships. And the Bike Pedestrian Plan Update and improved public transit. Encourage shift to more sustainable or green modes, improved and affordable accessibility. One of my, I know this is not all inclusive.
Yep.
But and I know there is a lot of community and public engagement built into all of these things, but these are all municipal driven.
Yeah.
activities? Do we have intention or plan to to address number 2 of our mandate by increasing awareness outside of city, already established city efforts?
Great point. And that would be including education and
Right.
outreach and engagement, not necessarily policies, programs, and decisions.
Exactly.
Well, Portsmouth
Yes.
Community Power would be an example of a community, one that kind of crosses a line, but it's probably more community than city in a lot of ways.
Yep.
Good one to add in there.
That's interesting, Peter. So that committee is a city committee. And they've enacted a policy through the city that makes the default the option to have 100% renewable.
Not the default. The default is.
I know excuse me, the default is that you use that, but
Same.
within that, yeah, I was able to get 100%, which I wouldn't have done on my own, was too hard.
But you had to take action as a member of the community. It wasn't like the community, the city government did that for you. They enabled it, but they didn't make you turn the switch.
Yeah, that's a great example. And I think like, I didn't even know what the capital improvement plan was for around 10 years being on the committee. Capital improvement is a huge leverage, right? That's where we propose money that's going to be spent.
But if
And
the
we-
if the city's decisions on the money to be spent is that, we have other things like when Herb was advocating initiatives to get people to use electric lawn equipment, that wouldn't be necessarily a city ordinance, but it could be something that this committee could weigh in on through education and other activities. And I would say the community conversations that Portsmouth Climate Action has done with, and I don't know how much we want to link that to the actions of this community, the committee, but we certainly talk about those quite a bit, and they're designed to support the cap. Really, I mean, that's an example.
I think
where
they're
it's community.
collaboration, but those are initiated by Portsmouth Climate Action,
Yeah.
which is sort of my point. It's not a city initiative
No.
that we are facilitating education. It's something
Yeah.
that, yeah. So yeah.
Yeah,
that's-
but are there examples of things this committee does that are on the education side as opposed to things that maybe some of the grassroots groups like the Portsmouth Climate Action does?
I'm not sure if there are yet, but that's sort of
Could
my
be.
point, is that
Could be.
is that part of our role moving forward, is that we initiate some things to fulfill the number 2 of
Yeah.
increasing awareness.
I would, yes, I'm still kind of learning the processes of government here. So Peter, when we got the $80,000 for the cap, we initially had to put that in to the capital improvement, didn't we? Now,
The council did.
the council did.
Yeah.
So it wasn't our
Uh,
committee.
Committee recommended, but the council creates the capital, adopts the capital improvement plan.
So that would be great what Tori said. Here's where the committee
Yep.
is fulfilling
Influence.
its mandate by recommending to the council. The council put $80,000 in. 2 years later, Kate stays up night trying to get the plan completed, right? So we can have a report out of that soon, right? So
I would
And I would
say,
also add Tori's and Aubrey's green building policy, the
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
that they spent a lot of time and effort working on. That's something that stemmed from this committee that they spearheaded.
and we could talk about the natural step for citizens conditions, and we could talk about the course that the city sponsored for Caring for the Future drawdown. So those are some of the things that
Yeah.
we could put in. And I'm trying to think, are these all being captured? Where are we at in the website? I'm kind of thinking, is this kind of
Dotted line,
what?
a dotted line between this conversation.
Yeah, or is somewhere, this is an aside, where is the redesign of the city website?
For us,
for us.
I think we decided a working group with Jess, Effie and me.
Yeah,
Which is on pause slightly while Effie is out of the country.
Right, so probably picking up in July.
Yes.
okay, but you're taking notes that you and Effie will, these are the things they're doing. All right, so we have a direct line to you two guys. That's what I just want to,
So back to this, I think, again, this can be representative, but it's probably good to get down as many of these things as we can, if you don't mind busting the 1-page limit on this. Since this is internal, no big problem. I don't have to worry about playing with the fonts or anything, but bigger margins, yeah. I go to a 9 font, but I think, let's say if this ends up being an internal resource for committee members that maybe are involved in a public meeting or involved with meeting with staff, it may be they can pick the ones that are most relevant to it. Let's say if someone from this committee is meeting with another committee to say, this is what the sustainability committee does. These are principles and practices. We hope you'll use this tool from the list of, maybe if we have 15 or 20 different examples, maybe there's 7 or 8 that would be relevant for each particular thing. But we'll add those, and I'll get back to folks that suggested some of these to make sure I get the wording the way you want, but it's all great suggestions. I think particularly the one about distinguishing between the things that are city and the things that are community, consistent with the second point on the ordinance.
a point that I'm thinking now is as people now are coming on or off the committee, we might have an introductory packet. And this might be something that we'd hand them so that it would spell out. I haven't, does that make any sense? So that if we got that in the notes.
That's in the ordinance.
What's that?
This and the ordinance.
The ordinance. Is an introductory part of the packet for a
Yeah.
new member.
And probably each of these examples that are things that have either are prior or things that are underway, and most of these things are underway, could have a hyperlink to the page, let's say the page for the housing.
Right,
Or the
because you
page
wouldn't
for
give them
the,
a hard copy packet, you'd give them a digital packet, right?
yeah.
Of course, Peter, you were just reading my mind.
Because there are links to the bike ped plan and links to the Market Square,
Yeah.
and there will be links to the master plan, so.
Yeah, very easy to do.
You just have a bullet, but if someone is really interested in, well, really, where has the committee been involved, or where could it be involved? Because we're really talking about potential rather than actual, and maybe we've had an impact on some of these things to a greater or lesser degree, but I think the intent is to have a greater impact in the future. Should we go on to the external
Let's do it.
piece? Yeah, the second piece is intended for something that could be handed out, let's say in a meeting, and these questions really, originally they were questions, and I think Effie made a very good case. Because I was thinking, as a former federal bureaucrat, I'm always very cautious about things, and I set them up to be discussion openers. And Effie's more action oriented, and she wanted them to be more not prescriptive, but more moving toward some actions. So they're reworded to be more moving toward actions. Maybe somebody could read the intro box and then maybe a couple of the points. These are a bit updated and reworded from the last version, but it's basically the same set.
I can read some. if you want. You want me to go?
Yeah.
Guidelines for developing strategies to advance sustainability. To advance the principles and practices of sustainability, the Portsmouth, New Hampshire Sustainability Committee encourages city council members, staff, committees and boards, businesses and organizations and households to consider the following guidelines when developing strategies to modify existing or design new policies, programs, and investment decisions. The topics are aligned closely with the Sustainability Committee's responsibilities and the 2024 Portsmouth Climate Action Plan, CAP. For each proposed strategy, what are greenhouse gas and climate resilient impacts? Does it support implementation of the CAP? And what are the trade-offs between the three E's of sustainability, economy, environment, and social equity? How might the strategy lead to actions that accelerate scalable sustainability?
And I think that point on community as well as city, I think we can modify this to capture that as well.
You want me to keep going?
Why don't you do 3 and then maybe you can do the next, if you don't mind.
The first, evaluate and adapt the ways the strategy supports implementation of the CAP by reducing greenhouse gas emissions and strengthening climate resilience. Evaluate the strategy's reliance on non-renewable energy sources and plan for shifts to renewable energy and reduction of energy demand. Estimate greenhouse gas impacts and plan to track greenhouse gas emissions over time. Consider actions to encourage a shift to renewable energy, for example, such as energy conservation and efficiency, such as shifts to public transit, walking, bicycling, or electric vehicles, weatherization of buildings, and use of solar energy. B, apply or adapt available tools to estimate greenhouse gas emission and energy consumption, such as the EPA Simplified Emissions Calculator. And 3, design the strategy to address social equity and fairness in distribution of services and benefits and explore ways to improve related impacts. A, identify ways to address disproportionate climate and other impacts on low-income or other disadvantaged households, such as substandard housing, access to green space and public transit, and barriers to public participation.
4, evaluate and strengthen the ways the strategy addresses climate resilience and adaptation. For example, A, reduce removal of trees and expansion of paved surfaces that exacerbate the effects of hot weather. B, reduce building where sea level rise is forecast and may put people in harm's way. C, anticipate and adapt to extended periods of hot weather, which can limit outdoor work or activities. D, plan scenarios, get supplies, and train staff for extreme weather events and power loss. 5, assess how the strategy harms or protects the environment, weakens or strengthens the community, and has a negative or positive economic impact. Evaluate the effects of not implementing the strategy and proposed actions. Modify the strategy to increase positive results. 6, evaluate how the program reduces waste, reuses materials, and uses reclaimed materials. Modify to incorporate reduction, reuse, and reclamation of materials as much as possible. A, avoid single-use plastics and promote composting at workplaces, events, public facilities, businesses, and households. 7, identify ways the strategy conserves water and reduces water consumption, and explore ways to further conserve or reduce water consumptions. Communicate information to the community to encourage adoption of the strategy. Keep going.
Sure.
8, address whether the strategy protects or restores natural resources, including habitats, and explore ways to advance these efforts. 9, analyze the potential to expand the strategy and estimate the resource requirements to scale up and accelerate positive results. Share information about efforts to expand positive impacts. 10, assess immediate benefits that the strategy produces, as well as other positive, direct or indirect co-benefits or negative impacts on overall sustainability for future generations.
So comments on any of these individually or collectively, or anything to drop or anything to add? The idea is that this would be a tool handout to be adapted depending on what the context and circumstance is. So could be a subset of these are useful depending on what job.
The only thing I would add is to 6A, where it talks about avoid single-use plastics and promote composting. I would just simply add promote composting and reusable containers, seeing as we're looking at the single-use food service ware.
And reusable containers. Yeah. It's nice to see that some of these things were already well underway and into, which is good. Other thoughts?
Can I
I'm-
ask if we can scroll up a little bit? So I can, yeah, thank you. I was wondering if with the weatherization of buildings. I mean, I get so energy conservation and efficiency. I guess energy conservation and efficiency to me in buildings is not just weatherization. So I don't know how to get to, efficiency of like mechanical systems and that type.
But Tori, how about if we give you editorial license, if you would like to? Not
It's
in the
dangerous,
right-
but okay.
No more words. But yeah, if you want to do that, that would be great. And same for any of these.
Yeah, Tori, when I was talking to John Terry about housing, it would be great if we could apply this, say, to
Supposed to be a comment.
workforce housing, where it would reduce their energy costs. The whole envelope would be like a living building. That would be more energy, we could start to play with really thinking about long-term building and use. I think that's where you're going, if I'm not mistaken, rather than just weatherization. How do we build something that is really sustainable, both materials, energy, and so forth? Am I going where you're thinking?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're pointing towards that work.
Okay,
Which is only encompassed in weatherization, so I can propose how to kind of sneak that in there. And then my other note is actually on B of that same thing. Love pointing to emission calculators tools and real data, and I think that's important, but I always want to emphasize, like, maybe we give examples of how to apply and adapt using those tools. Sometimes the gap between these calculators that give you a number and doing something with that number is the hard part. So maybe we could give some examples, of like choice in procurement of products and materials, or, like what are those numbers driving? Rather than it just being kind of like an accounting exercise.
yep, good point. So it could be examples of that example, because that's an example, but it could be examples on material procurement, or from my world, examples of greenhouse gas reductions from mode shift when somebody stops driving and gets on the bus or teleworks. Jess.
I think Tori kind of furthered my question of how detailed is this document
Yeah.
intended to be? For me, the waste one is a big one, so I could probably give you like B, C, D, so how.
That's the thing. I think what
Going with each of these.
I think it was Effie who really thought having some examples would be useful, which I think is true. But the examples should just be representative, because I think most of us have our own sectors of expertise, and we could go all the way through the alphabet on that. So maybe if you want to suggest some of the rewording like Tori just did, still keep it concise, but still cover a little more ground while still being concise. Maybe, Jess, if you wanted to suggest a way to do that on the waste ones as well.
Yeah, because I think 6 is great, and I think 6A, we definitely need to work on, but that's one very specific activity around waste. There's
Yep.
lots of other things as a community we could be, or any community could be thinking about if this is a bigger, broader.
Yeah, I think the more input we get from the committee, the better, because I think, my expertise is broad sustainability, but definitely transportation. So when I start getting into waste in buildings and solar, I tend to keep it concise because I don't have much more to say.
Fair.
So,
I have one more thing. On the social equity one, I really would encourage us to also like use the term burden shifting. Because there's social equity from the past, and then there's continuing to be aware of social equity and burden shifting of future policy. And I think it's important to speak to both sides of it. So if we could sneak that in there, I think it would be helpful.
I couldn't quite get the words that you were saying to him.
Oh, sorry, burden shifting.
Burden shifting, that's what, okay, got it.
So, you know, looking at future policies and being conscious of burden shifting moving forward, not just addressing equity issues of the current state.
Not equity in a static sense, but more
Yes.
forward-looking sense. For revising this, what can we do within the committee rules to have a cycle of input? Can people send input to Kate or?
Oh, yeah,
Can we
they
do
can
that?
send it to Kate, yep.
Send it to Kate and then how then can I revise it with the inputs? Because I've got
She
people's
can send it
comments
to
from
you,
this
and then you
meeting.
can bring it to the next meeting.
Okay,
Does that work?
So if people individually send edits, then I can forward them to you?
yeah. And I'll start working on the edits that came out of this meeting as well. And maybe I'll do a track change version of this so you can quickly see what's changed. That's great.
Great, so just to sum that up, that Bill will continue to make the changes to the document that we've all discussed. Anybody has anything else they want to input, send it to Kate, or even directly to Bill, either way. And he'll bring something back. Yes,
I just have a quick question. This is just meant to be examples you said earlier, correct? Of 4D, we do this in the health department already. We already have supplies. We try to get volunteers to train for extreme weather. That's part of what is written into, the city has plans for stuff like that. Is that information that you want, or is that too
How
much?
how about if
information?
we added something about collaborate with the health department?
Yeah, it would be with
Uh,
emergency response
yeah.
team for the city, actually. We have,
Because we would be focusing more on the climate side of it
Yeah.
and the action side of it than is
Well-
your arena, but connecting the two.
well,
is-
the education, the community piece for our education, if that's gonna be part of this, we always need volunteers. In the event we have extreme weather events that require us to stage, that could be a part of the outreach for the citizens to understand that there's need for volunteers in those circumstances as well. If there's a huge hurricane comes through and we have to set up shelter, for instance, we don't have enough staff to fully staff that. So opportunities surrounding climate events are an educational point, I guess I'm trying to say. So I don't know if that's
So I think
worthwhile
we've
for,
talked on Portsmouth Climate Action about a community conversation around another one on health that could focus on
Yeah.
heat particularly.
yeah,
heat
heat's a big
particularly.
one, yeah.
I would say for any of these things that you've mentioned, if you'd like to take a shot without adding lots of words,
Yep.
just a little bit of words like that one, and Tori, the one about the burden sharing. And I think you had one other. If you could take a stab at adding some words, send those to Kate with a sort of a highlight or track change of what you edited, then we can get all those into the next version.
and Kristen, I love the connections here. When Portsmouth Climate Action has a talk on health, it'd be great if you could connect. And when people are at the end, we're always trying to get actions. It'd be great if you had, for those people who would actually like to be of service, you could be here's a real opportunity in our city to do that. That's the kind of connecting I think would be great.
Yeah, and I've come to a few of those talks and we're happy to provide that information as well. We don't run it. It's run by a different organization for getting volunteer staff. but I would love to do that.
And
we-
our value added is the link to the climate action plan.
Yeah.
And climate, your starting point is how to respond to a heat emergency. You know, to do something immediate, to plan for it, to anticipate it, to respond and protect, and that connection to climate adaptation and weather emergency is maybe a value added that we can help with.
And resilience. And you're welcome to come on a Wednesday night from 7 to 8 the Portsmouth Climate Action. As we get closer and we're planning that or any time and just drop in and say, this is something that that came up.
Yeah, where are we? Because I know we've talked about a health topic, or we filled up the dance card.
I was gonna say you and I should chat.
Yeah.
We're we're working on dates and some of the identifying things that are gonna be discussed, but there's definitely room to figure that out.
Might be a
Yeah.
good connection.
That's a really promising one, and I think one that people would be really interested in.
Great.
All right, so I think we have,
Yeah.
where are we going? Any other comments before we close this item?
Yeah, just before closing the item, what I'd hoped to do was to review, revise, we've done that, finalize, maybe we can do that the next meeting. And then maybe talk about next steps, what to do with the material. So maybe that's a topic for the next meeting, along with finalizing this.
And that by then Effie will be back and we'll be starting to talk about the next step is how to
Yeah.
coordinate. those things. All right, so we're moving on to item number 4, renewable energy policy strategies versus cap draft strategies comparison continued. Any comments or thoughts on that?
So this was continued from last month. I think you were in a city council meeting, so you couldn't make it. but I think we had talked about trying to compare the latest strategies against the renewable energy ones to see if there's overlap. We still want to do that? We have time.
I think the question is, do we want to focus on that? Or do we want to focus on the single-use food serviceware policy?
Is Tracy gonna do a presentation?
Not a presentation, I'll be 5 minutes.
Okay.
I'll be
And
quick.
Tracy, I'm thinking, as Bill was doing this, you're gonna be perfect for I'm seeing, how do you fit in to our strategy? So are you okay with being last? And
Yeah, a lot of overlap with what I was gonna talk about, so.
okay, great.
Kate, can I just, the yellow are additions, right? New strategies or,
Yes, oh, I'm glad you picked that up. I forgot to
okay,
note that, but, so. I apologize for getting everybody's hopes up about having, a separate meeting to go over the draft, but we didn't get the full draft. We got bits and pieces of the draft that, we're working to get a full draft of before we bring it to you guys, but they did give us all the updated strategies in the 4 or 6 that were highlighted are the new additions, which are not too groundbreaking or
I like the managed retreat.
they did some good ones there. But,
yeah. And it was good to see single-use plastic stuff addressed more specifically, so those were all both.
maybe it would be more beneficial to do that comparison next month. I think the skip the stuff policy, Counselor Cook brought that up at city council back in April. And it was referred to the sustainability committee. It's bounced through some city departments for review, and I think, they're waiting to hear back from us if we want to make a recommendation tonight, or at least start to look at it. I'll get going on that.
Are you talking about that?
Are you waiting for me to say something? Glenn?
No.
Okay.
You have something for Kristen to say? I don't think so. I think it's,
Oh, no, I don't think so. So I sent it around and we have paper copies if people didn't get it, but, the skip this stuff policy was, here's this one. Kate Cook, Council Cooks, it came for us once, and maybe it didn't come for us, but, it went for us. City council and then was bounced to staff for review as, an ordinance. And it was found to be awesome, but unenforceable right now with the way health department enforcement is set up and different ways that we can do violations and require third-party food platforms to serve enforcement. So this was Counselor Cook's sort of second go at it with, I think, input from health and legal. So it's now a policy, a city policy instead of an ordinance. And it focuses a lot on education and outreach. So sort of like the first step at getting towards opting into single-use plastics. So
I have a couple of thoughts. First, thank you for this. And is everyone familiar with what this is trying to accomplish? Yes.
Not
So,
more than a brief look at it.
so I'm gonna dumb this down, but essentially what it's trying to do is get, here it's called food service providers, but anyone in the city who is providing food to be consumed, encouraging them not to use single-use disposables. And it focuses on a couple different things. One thing it talks about is like ketchup packets, mayonnaise packets, not bundling them together. Because a lot of people will get a bundle and they just want one thing from it. It's encouraging them to have people request any of the items and request them individually. And the, is that a fair description? And one recommendation which I would make is the policy goes ahead and defines food service provider. But I was just looking at the single-use disposable ordinance that we have that already has a definition for food service establishment, where I think it would make sense using the same definition. So I'll read the food service establishment one, and I think it checks all the boxes. It's just a little simpler. It reads, any restaurant, takeout food establishment, or any other business that is required to obtain a valid food service license from the Public Health Department of the City of Portsmouth. Food service establishments do not include nonprofit food establishments. So with the exception of that last sentence regarding nonprofits, essentially anyone who needs to get a license from the Public Health Department, which is anyone who's serving food, is everyone who's covered under this. And the reason why we made a distinction years ago when we passed this for nonprofits is we want to make soup kitchens have to comply with something that would be an extra cost. So that was just a thought. I'm fine leaving it as it is, or just bringing it in line with existing ordinances.
Soup kitchens don't have to be permitted through us if that helps at all with this. They're not, there's an exception for soup kitchens in the food code, so.
I couldn't hear what you're saying.
Soup kitchens aren't required to be permitted through the health department. We have an exception for soup kitchens. We do education for food safety, but they're not required to be licensed. I don't know if that matters, but just putting that out
Probably
there.
does matter because if it doesn't need to be in the definition. So the definition, but the definition you have is already there, it's already there.
Correct. The definition is already there.
If they're
and-
getting education and this is a policy, then it still works to leave it in there. So it'd be better not to create a separate definition covering the same topic.
The only thing what about Meals on Wheels as a nonprofit? We do license them. I mean, I don't know if that's gonna fit.
Yeah, so Meals on Wheels, the way that would work here is, and I've gone out and delivered for Meals on Wheels, they wouldn't be required under the current
Current.
definition on the ordinance to abide by this, which I think, say it makes sense because they're free meals being delivered to people. I don't know if the people are specifically ordering anything. It's
Yeah,
just here's a meal.
Here's your food. Yeah, yeah.
That's just my 2 cents.
But so all of the like grocery stores and all of those are
All
covered.
licensed. Yep.
That would be, because I did appreciate this list was pretty detailed.
Yeah.
So,
This looks like they took it from the RSA's actually,
Yeah.
that definition.
I mean, I'm
Yeah.
fine with what you said, Josh, as long
Either
as
way.
it's, all of these are covered. Although the stickler in me just wants to see all plastic gone. And
Yes.
is that equitable to make people who can't afford meals have to use plastic? But I don't want to cause hardships to our nonprofit organizations, so. Yeah, but that's fine with me, as long as all of these that are specifically mentioned are covered in what you're recommending, Josh. I don't know if anybody else has 2 cents.
Any of the caterers, cafeterias, stores, shops, retail sale, outlets, groceries, all of them serving food would have to be licensed. But yeah, I'm fine with how it's worded now. I just thought it'd be more consistent.
I have one wording thing that maybe you might be able to answer, Kristen. Under section 4 in the last sentence, the consumer does not select any single-use food serviceware or single-use condiments. No single-use food serviceware or single-use condiments shall be provided by the food service provider or the third-party delivery platform. Is that enforceable, or should we change the shall to should? Because can we,
Is that the only shall in the whole thing?
I think so, everything else is shoulds. But
Yeah.
if that's saying that we can require the third-party. food
Kind of is,
provider
although the whole thing's a policy, so I guess
is
it's open for
enforceable.
debate probably, but that's a good point. I don't think it should say shall if we're trying to educate. Right.
Well, and shall, we cannot enforce anything
Right.
for third-party delivery platforms.
Yeah.
We don't license them. I have no control over what they do. There's nothing I can do. Can't slap their hands even. I wouldn't know who to call. So there'd be, I think, keeping it consistent.
So should
Yeah.
instead of shall.
Probably should, yeah.
We use shall for anything that's enforceable. So,
Yeah, and it's hard to say it's enforceable in a policy, so.
yeah.
The one other thing I had, if we do keep food service provider as it is, where it says insert name of city, county and state. That should probably be made to say Portsmouth, Rockingham County,
Yeah,
or it's voted on.
Next the world.
before it's voted on, yeah. Yeah. Good point.
This still has to go, we still have, we have one more staff meeting about this still.
Just among you at the health department?
Not,
or-
with no other departments. Yeah. No, we're, health department's ready. We're good.
So we all set with this?
So what are, I mean,
So we need to make,
yeah,
if we are done with edits, we want to make a motion to recommend it back to city council with our edits.
I found another shall,
Oh,
2 sentences prior. 4th line under item 4. Shall customize its. Shall. Oh,
We
yep,
can
another
just do a
one.
search.
yeah. but
Let's
I
do a
think
search on
paragraph has a
shall.
few-
How about we just do a search on shall?
Yeah, I think we could.
We could probably expedite that.
I'll motion to send this to the city council. Pending all shalls be replaced with should. And the city, county and state.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
One more, am I allowed to say one more thing?
Go ahead.
Okay, in the first section, the 4th line, which is a goal of the state. I don't know.
A goal, good.
And I would just say thank you for working on this. It was a little disappointing to hear the ordinance didn't seem to be going anywhere, so I appreciate
So let me see if I can summarize where this came up. Originally, we wanted to eliminate as much plastic and single use as possible, both for waste, energy, and health. We wanted an ordinance. We found out that the ordinance was going to be unenforceable and not practical. We shifted from an ordinance to a policy, which is educational, which is what the health department does. And so we are now moving to a place where the council asks us to give them their opinion. And our opinion is that we now think this is a good policy for us to have in place. Is that a relatively clear summary? Okay,
And I have a question. Is this a increasing awareness of sustainable practices among residents, business and visitors activity that this committee participates in? I'm assuming in conjunction with the health department, and they are trying to educate and do outreach.
so that's where I think the dots, as Bill would say, connecting the dots. If somehow Kristen can get into the health and we do, there's where we start to become a synergistic system and
And
have more energy to get things done.
I'd add the website as well,
Mhm.
seeing how part of this is listing businesses that comply on the website.
Oh,
Wow.
Full circle.
That's your
Hey.
website, sustainability website. Or-
On the city website.
Oh,
yes,
oh,
sustainability.
okay.
Yeah, that gives some notoriety.
it could be on the health if you
Yeah,
want
it
it
could
there.
be, we could probably do something for that too.
Yeah,
However,
somewhere
We
on,
wanna, we
somewhere on the
wanna,
city's website,
know,
health, we could do health and sustainability.
but you know, small steps here at least. It's a
Yeah.
step, so.
Yeah, somebody can have the whole list and somebody else can link to it.
And better give them a little sticker they can put on their door.
A sticker.
Say, we're.
Give an electronic smile or hand wave. All right.
I found another small edit if I'm allowed to
Go ahead.
continue. Okay.
Mhm.
The last sentence, this policy shall take effect 120 days.
Days.
I'm assuming days.
That's, yeah. I wonder why the
Years.
lag. Wonder why that, any idea why that lag is in there? 120 days?
I think this. Is directly from council. This is the one that went to city
Councilor Cook
council.
put it in there?
This was, yeah, this is the copy from city council's agenda.
Yeah, that was my question too, is why such a long
Why wait
before.
3 months? Yeah.
Thought maybe it was like standard language for what, for their
It might have been
policies.
on the policy she took it from.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. Is there, maybe there's some reason.
And I sent this to Counselor Cook as soon as you sent it out.
Oh.
So assuming she had reviewed it and I could ask if 120 day.
3 readings or something.
Does anybody have any problem if we reduce it if she says, oh, I don't think it needs to be? I mean, she could do it at the council meeting too, but
No, I would advocate for that.
sooner would be better probably.
Yeah,
Are you
I mean,
okay
if-
with that?
once the city council passes it. Well, I feel like that'd be dependent on you, since it seems like health department.
If we
is
can have
the-
more than like a day's notice, that would be helpful. Just to start to gear up, so.
Good. You ready to move on?
I think you need to vote.
How we voted?
We just.
No, we voted on the,
A motion and a second, and then you had a bunch
Oh.
of discussion.
all those in favor of passing it on?
Right.
All right,
All those opposed? It passes. All right, so we did renewable energy, single use. Home energy workshop.
Right. So those of you who don't know me, I used to be on this committee and now I am on the Energy Advisory Committee, just recently on that. And trying to focus on energy efficiency in residential housing and community house, municipal housing. So I would like to organize, coordinate a button-up workshop. I think you're probably all familiar with those. There's funding available for another one, and looking at the end of October, maybe October 23rd at the library. So I came to ask for your support and see if that's a good date for you. But I also wanted to give you some background on some other funding that is coming down the pike from the federal government that I think will really boost some of this energy efficiency in the home. So all the states have applied for these climate pollution reduction grants that are going to be awarded in July. And New Hampshire has, and the full amount is 5 billion across the states. So most states have applied. So that'll be to states and local governments across 6 sectors. What New Hampshire has applied for is probably 3 buckets that could impact us. New Hampshire's applied for about $50 million that will be spread over a bunch of areas, 5 areas. One is weatherization. Then you also have things like EV infrastructure, public transit, improve energy efficiency and install renewable energy at drinking water systems and workforce development. The other 2 buckets that they've applied for are coalition grants. They're both 500 million. So one is a coalition of 13 states that Hawaii has led, and that's for municipalities to be resilient in an emergency situation. So like a hurricane, weather event.
I have ideas already.
What?
I have ideas already.
And then there is also another coalition that Connecticut is leading, another 500 million for New England heat pump transformation. It's going to be modeled after a California program that has been successful. So the details aren't out. Money's probably going to be flowing pretty soon after the awards are announced. They'll probably be starting to push the money out before the end of the year. So it's really helpful for anyone in an area to start planning on taking advantage of these. So I don't think New Hampshire has a good plan for how they're going to spend it, but they're looking for groups to come to them with projects, come to them with ideas. They're going to put out a request for input or what that would look like. So if we can get positioned for that and have a plan in place, I think we're in a better position to get some of those funds. I guess the other thing I'd like to ask from you is for the button-up workshop, I thought October is a good time because we'll have a good length of time to promote it. And what I've seen with some of these workshops are they are geared towards the people who are already listening, and particularly things like solar. If you're having a solar workshop, it's going to be people who can afford it. A lot of these funds are meant to go to people who don't have those funds and the lower income, parts of the community. So to the extent that we can get this out and kind of bring those folks into the conversation at the button-up workshop and some of these other programs that we'll be able to promote as they, the details are available. I think that's a challenge, and it would be great to have your help in figuring out how to reach that population.
Go ahead, Bill.
I'm going to say, for expressing interest in the funds, is that expected to come from public agencies or nonprofits or citizens groups or partnerships or what?
It's a whole host of different things. So municipalities are one. Some are for-profit, people that do weatherization can come with a project.
So some of these grants specify who is eligible for them. So it could be a city or a regional planning group, and are there others open to non-city
Yes,
applicants?
all of the above. And I don't think the details are out. There is someone, have a few people at the state who have been working on this. So the state got, I forget how much, quite a lot of money. All the states got money to start developing these plans and programs. So the three people that we've spoken to at the state, Peter, you were on that call, right? They're new. They, you know,
brand
they
new.
were just hired and they're building out the program. So it's
Is this tied to the state's climate action plan, or is this different?
They had to, I think they had to do their climate action plan.
To be eligible for this, so that was why the
That
hurry,
was so
the
fast.
hurry up was on that, yeah.
And I can't speak to these, but I know I've looked at other federal funds and they're all, it like you can be two nonprofits, you can be a nonprofit collaborating with the city or some other group, or so there's all different various ways that you can apply for these monies, it seems like.
yeah.
I can give a little bit of context. So those funds are a little bit interesting in the way that they're not running like typical grants per se. And like you're not applying. So New Hampshire is like not even really acting as a pass through. So they're not individual grants for projects, right? It's like New Hampshire gets a pot of money and then people can come to them. So it's actually in some ways less burdensome than like other grant programs, right? Where you have to apply as like specific entities for a specific project and have a budget to even get those funds. So there's a lot of more opportunity there, I think. I think the clarity is hard to get until they make that grant announcement. And then a lot of those details become public, and I imagine the state will roll out that plan. But I mean, if we have the contacts at the state to ask what their, you know, what their interest is and the kind of which buckets they're looking for projects, I think it's a really valuable thing to plug into, and especially leaning in on whatever we can do with, you know, environmental equity and justice work, I think is a really good thing to underline in those grants.
Yeah, so what Kurt Youngling wrote today, he said the New Hampshire DES plans to issue a request for information after EPA shares the information on the awards. The goal of that is to gain feedback from the public contractors and municipalities before finalizing the mechanisms for drafting the application process, RFPs. He was offered to come out and speak to folks, so I think it might make sense once they have that to have, you know, the Energy Commission, this committee, have them come talk to the right people, whoever those people are.
So I just trying to get the picture here. Lots of money coming to the state. Not clear how it's going to be distributed, but it's going to be coming for sustainability, for resilience. We have a cap. We have a mandate. We want to accelerate. And Peter, because you're thinking about the planning all the time, are you in a position now where as we look at the cap and the projects that are coming up, so that you would be able to bring to the committee saying, hey, here's one that is, we could apply and we could then, the committee could support that. Is that kind of the way it's looking at this point?
I'm certainly sure the committee support would be really helpful. It sounds like it's an easier program to get the funds from because you don't have to go through a state application. Although federal applications sometimes are super complicated with the online grant applications you have to do. But either way, like you said, there's a lot of money. And we have a lot of things in the cap that we can, you know, connect to it probably,
Because if we have the cap, we already have a
Right.
document.
which always helps.
We have a
put an
committee,
application
so
together.
it's kind of putting it together. And so I'm looking
Well,
at,
it's seeing what's available and how you get it, yeah. But that's really helpful to know that it's coming from the feds, not the state's more just facilitating it, getting to the,
Well, so
Getting
the
to-
state will do the application process, so they get the big pot of money, which is what they're waiting on, information from EPA, right, on how and when and the details and the terms and conditions and all the fun stuff. So they'll get that, and then it sounds like the RFI process will happen, for them to decide and make a public comment on how they should structure that application process. But the application will still be through the state. And they'll have to report up to, the feds, but, it sounds like these RFPs would be specifically to the state for a piece of that pot of money.
This is different than a lot of other federal programs where.
It's a very different structure than is normal, and it was intended that way to be more nimble and to allow, states and these entities to disperse funds as works best for their communities, essentially, which is why the cap was part of that requirement, like an assessment. If we're gonna give you that, so it will be through the state, from my understanding, but I would encourage us to not just wait for the RFP, but if we can have somebody come in and talk, that's always the best way to get information. And when the RFI opens, to respond to the RFI as a municipality of the types of projects that, and things that we think would be most utilizable, because then it'll just increase the chances of those being focuses for the RFP.
Yeah, so maybe we should talk about a date in August, late August, and see who you all think should be invited, and I'll try to set that up.
Great.
I also, if you're interested, I have some slides on the program and the implementation grant. I can forward it to Kate to share with the group. Great.
Tracy, it's my recollection, this is the area where you've worked in for years, policy and funding, and this is kind of your bailiwick a little bit, or are you just putting your toe into this?
No, I work with large oil and gas companies, trying to get them to decarbonize. But I'm working in Texas on a similar program there. That's why I've had a little bit of insight, but no, I'm not. I think Corey's the
because-
policy person.
Okay, so good. It's like to know who has the. All right, so what I'm getting and where I'm looking is, how are we ready to get, this is a lot of money to leverage, but what's more important, do we have identified in our local community through the cap those things which will be most worth funding? Because you say you don't have the funds. Well, let's say we have all the funds we want. What do we
Yeah,
really
there's-
want to do? Do we know what we want to do yet? I think that's what our committee can maybe helpfully come up with. And how are we getting to those things? That's a little bit of what I thought we started tonight. We're looking at when the cap comes in and what are the policies we have in place, and where do we focus to get the most leverage? And we're kind of dipping our toes into that discussion. Is that where we're at?
It may not even be necessary to wait for the cap. You start thinking about it because we know the strategies in the cap.
Yeah, so that's what I get that, so, because it's not my strength to know all the different things, but is that what we're thinking about?
Yeah, I think the cap and other things, I don't think we have to limit it to what the cap spells out, but the cap spelling things out and prioritizing things is gonna help make that decision easier. And also help support the application because it's in a plan in the community. So they're gonna look more favorably on a community that's put together a cap, identified these things, and then is applying for funding for those things that were identified in their cap versus just saying we want to do it because we think it'd be good. Either way, though, it sounds like there's a lot of money and they'll probably be distributing it. The big thing that Tracy said, though, that we're not talking about is the equity part. And so the one, good, bad, or otherwise, Portsmouth doesn't have a lot of disadvantaged people we've identified. That doesn't mean they're not here, but we haven't done a great job of bringing them out. So the more we can think about that, I think would really help us on this kind of application.
And that's consistent with the first thing we talked about, where equity is down there, right? Based on the ordinance and on the sustainability practices and principles. Equity is there. I think equity was a criterion in the cap.
Yeah, and I think related to the equity piece that there's a map of LIDAC, low income disadvantaged communities. And the way the state divvied it up, Portsmouth only had, I don't know, 10 or 13% of the state in terms of counties, but in terms of population, it had almost a quarter. So the way they divvy it up, I think there's a strong argument to be made that if we look at the population and not just the number of counties, that Portsmouth actually is a really good area for focus.
It may be that in the cap, I think, from what I remember of those strategies, those are really anticipating funding problems and limitations. So it may be that they're most useful part of the strategy is the topic opener. So in many cases, it may say do a study on a topic where maybe there's great potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions through a project, but it doesn't say do a project. It says do a study. I'm thinking of the bike ped plan or the microtransit shared
Right.
mobility, but it may be with these grants, it's possible to do the study, do the pilot and do a pilot, and based on that, then maybe move ahead with the project.
Okay, so you'll send the slides and then Kate can distribute them. And did you want to round the button up and rest of your question? Okay,
Well, I think this, Tracy said it early on about how to get to residents that we don't normally connect with. And I know you had talked to Seacoast Can and Portsmouth Climate Action about this being a community conversation. And doing it at the library, which for me, who's helped to just do the logistics of a lot of those, I'd be happy to support. But getting to that point of equity, this sounds like maybe this should be more of a sustainability committee workshop and not a community climate conversation, because I will say, while those events are valuable, it often feels like the same people are showing up to that room for those events, and they are not typically the people that you are trying to get to your event. So maybe there's a way that we can be more creative about where we host this or what time of day or something like that to try to access that community that doesn't typically show up to the library at 6:30 on a weeknight to listen to sustainable stuff. But it's just a thought.
We say usual suspects.
Yeah.
You might be able to use the community campus too.
I was thinking of that, yeah.
that's where I was going to go. For years, we wrestled with this problem with Portsmouth Physicians. And we'd always say we want to get the community input. And it's people who have time, money, and energy to come. And we've actually gone to the high school. We've gone out with Portsmouth Physicians and to the community campus. So if the population will button up, it seems to me there's a couple of the communities that CCAN even tried to get a recycling program going in the community behind Greenleaf over there. What's the name of that community?
Wamasett.
Yeah, that's community is low housing and wanted to get composting going there. That's a community, if it could be identified that it was going to save people money and that there were funds, you might be able to have, that's the kind of thing where we've gotten babysitters, but that's a big organization. That would be more to the social equity than a community conversation. We're in some ways singing more harmoniously with the choir than we are trying to get to the broader population. So I think I just reinforce what Jess was saying.
And what organization? Yeah, or if you could put that in writing, I'm not even familiar with the community campus. So yeah, I think that's really the people that I think would benefit most. And that
All right, I
was
just
a
give you-
The
concern.
Greenleaf Rec Center then might be a good place too, because that's
Mm.
Wamisit. And then there might be something we could do out at Gosling Meadows or something like that.
They have
And there
Have
are,
a center rec, yeah.
there are neighborhood associations, so it'd be possible to get leaders and representatives of the neighborhood. And
Yeah, you could
maybe they
just
could
write
help the
the-
individuals.
Write these down, community campus. $26 million went from selling our hospital. And that's what built the community campus. So it's already dedicated to public health. So that, and they have services out there, community campus. The second one, there's a senior center. That's where the old armory be. They're giving classes now for free, and there's a lot of people go there. Then where would be the other?
The Greenleaf
community-
Rec Center is just a place where you could have an event maybe for people that might be lower income or, more affordable housing nearby.
Do you think it would be best to have? So I think they said they only have funding for 3 or 4 more workshops across the state. So I think probably Portsmouth is only gonna get 1. But if we have 1 and then could have some of these sort of other have a representative who could go and talk.
Are
to
the
these other-
workshops for the people getting the funds or the people getting the funds to distribute?
They're for the community. They're
For
it's
everyone?
like New Hampshire Saves. Button-up workshops are for the community.
What does that fund? Facilitators and payment for the facility or what?
Yeah, the facilitator, and usually it's in a library, so it's free. But, maybe it makes sense to have a couple of different of these programs in these community centers in these various places versus 1.
Probably.
Okay, this is super helpful, so, it needs a little more work than just going to the library. I think that's a really good thought.
And if
I'm
you
happy
get
to-
a space, then we could, this committee and Portsmouth Climate Action could maybe help distribute to get other people who are interested. But we tried on the Portsmouth Climate Action, the check-in question was, how are you in regard to buttoning up? And almost everybody is an old buttoner up for the last 20 years, and we have different priorities now. So it's not high on the list of people our age who've been doing that for a while. So who is the audience is really pretty tough to define, and how are they going to see it as adding value to their life? And that's where I think button up, if there are people who saw they actually would lower their cost by doing these things and there's money to do it, that might be a value added part of a post. But that's kind of what I.
Yeah, so just maybe I'll connect to you. Offline and we can chat
Sure.
about this.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Any other items?
Give a real quick update on the solar in the HCC having missed the last meeting.
Okay,
I guess to recap, there's currently 27 or so exemptions that the Historic District Commission doesn't have purview over in the historic district. Back in December, Councilor Blaylock and I brought up adding exemptions for solar panels and for the conduits and everything else, meaning that the HEC wouldn't have the ability to review them. In January or so, it was referred to the planning board, which is required by statute, and the Historic District Commission was welcome to join the planning board in reviewing it. It took about 6 months, and the planning board recommended a set of recommendations that they should follow, that the Historic District Commission should follow. So at a meeting in, it's currently June, I don't remember if it's the first meeting in June or the last meeting in May, But the ordinance came forward. It was the version which Counselor Blaylock and I brought forward and had been amended a little bit, and then Counselor Moreau went to amend it to essentially replace stripping away the authority of the HDC and just saying they should follow these guidelines recommended by the planning board and the HDC. And then I successfully amended that to say, these guidelines that the HDC worked on are the actual rules. So if a applicant in the Historic District Commission wants to put solar on their property, if they meet these 6 criteria, staff could sign off and say, okay, it doesn't need to go from the Historic District Commission. But if it does not meet these criteria, then it goes in front of the Historic District Commission. So it went from being the initial exemption, which was everything that Councilor Blaylock and I brought forward, to the planning board and HCC's idea, which is, hey, here are recommendations, but the Historic District Commission can still review anything anyway. To the city council, it was a 5-4 vote that amended it and said, no, it's going to be these 6 criteria. These are the rules, and if they're met, they don't need to be reviewed by the Historic District Commission. Still going to require public hearing and 2 more sets of votes, but that's where that now stands.
So you're talking about administrative approval, right?
Correct. So it's, well, administrative approval, that's the
An
tricky
exemption.
word. It's a
They're calling it an
staff
exemption.
approval. Essentially versus HDC approval. The term administrative approval essentially meant that staff could recommend it. The HDC act or not, the HDC could actually
Yeah, they're-
still review it. So administrative approval doesn't mean staff approval.
I
So-
thought it was supposed to be some kind of streamlining of the approval process for the applicant.
Correct. So this is
Right, that's-
streamlining it.
Right, but it can
significantly.
still get held up even though it can,
So it wouldn't get held, so staff would review it, and if staff says it meets these criteria, it doesn't have to go from the HGC. So that's streamlining it,
It's basically an exemption.
yes.
right.
It
but
becomes an
no,
exemption.
The staff aren't expected to make decisions based on aesthetics at all, or,
We did our best, so with any project, staff will make decisions.
Hmm.
And with solar, whether it's minimally visible or not, yes, they're gonna have to make some decisions, but it's not gonna be just purely based on aesthetics, because that's not based on science or anything rational.
right, right.
So, but here it's what I could pass to the city council, because the original idea I didn't have the votes for. And it's taking this HDC seriously on their recommendations and saying, all right, these are the rules. And if people meet these criteria, they don't have to go in front of the HDC.
So some of those rules aren't, there isn't wiggle room in them.
So it's life. It's like all of life is gray, or it's not black or white.
Right,
So some things, yes, it's black or white. Other things, you're like, all right, there is some interpretation here,
right.
but that's how anything works.
And there's ways to work with it. The plan is to work with the chair, the HDC and staff. So it's not like just staff. Until they're pretty well trained on what this minimally visible, really, that's the hardest one. Is what minimally visible means to a person with a
Right.
historic preservation background.
Is
So
it,
some-
is this staff in planning and sustainability or public works?
Planning standard.
Yeah. It's the same staff that was reviewing them previously.
And
And
giving input to the HTC?
So you're trying to make the rules the least ambiguous.
Correct. Before there weren't really guidelines, and here we're saying now, if they meet the HDCs, if they wanted guidelines, we said rules, then they don't have to go from the HDC. So it's a lot clearer and less ambiguous.
Thanks,
That's where it stands as of now.
thanks, Josh. Being aware of time, I'd like to get us closed out in 8 minutes. That was an update. The cap, I assume, has already been updated, that we're just still waiting, and that do we have anything we want to say?
Well, we're trying to get it into city council by August, so ideally. I'm going to try to get a full draft to all of us for a work session in July, maybe, if we can pull that off with a week forum of Sustainability Committee. And hopefully at least a week to review it before we come together to look at it. And I think the idea is staff and Sustainability Committee will go through it with a fine tooth comb, make any edits or recommendations, send it back to VHB, and they'll do a week's worth of final editing, and then we'll submit it to the city council.
Good. And on community engagement, since our time is relatively short, just want to bring up that Portsmouth Climate Action was talking and reviewing the effectiveness of our website that Bright Action, no.
Yeah.
Bright Action. And so we still need want to talk about how effective is that? How do we want to use it? And I think that'll be a longer discussion unless anybody wants to say anything about that now. We could bring it to next week. Any comments now?
Maybe just under the broader heading of support for CAP implementation, the potential.
Yeah, we want to connect it to the CAP and see if the community,
Connect the Bright Action
Yeah.
or Portsmouth Climate Action.
Bright Action as part of the CAP that it,
Implementation.
yeah, and see if that makes sense. I'm not sure, but that's what we'll talk next week. Okay.
I've,
Yeah.
just since we're talking about community climate conversations, our next one is July 10th. It's, the Energy Advisory Committee is really leading this one, and it's about solar and discussing. It's gonna be members of that committee presenting, as well as Portsmouth residents who have solar, and talking about funding that's still out there for options. Discussing more about barriers to getting solar and people's experiences with having that. So that's the next one. And also, I know at one point I had talked about having somebody from the pollinator pathway come and present to us, and I dropped the ball a little bit about that and just emailed them this week saying we would be interested in having them come present, and I have not heard back yet, so I will let you know when I do.
So July
10th, Wednesday,
everybody.
6:30 in the Levinson Room.
6:30, good. All right, any other business? Are we ready to close the meeting and do our checkout? All right, and all in favor of, how do we do this?
I'll make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Oh, my gosh, all in favor,
Aye.
wave
Aye.
your
Aye.
hand in the air. Okay, check out. What are you taking away from